about to say something, but it slipped my mind. Hopefully you'll get back to me later, sorry. Just drew it blank there. Never mind. So, there's a certain type of language that many referees use in their letters to make them sound slightly nicer, although they mean something slightly different from what they actually say. Here are some examples. The study is descriptive. In essence, what that means is that the paper lists a collection of data that do not come together into a clear, hypothesis-driven study. So you have to redo your study, in essence, or redo the setup of your study to make a more convincing case. Or the study is incremental. The work builds on previous work without contributing any major change. We talked about that earlier. Just a few more data points among many is not sufficient to allow publication. Or the study lacks important controls. That means you have to do more experiments to validate your results. Right? So this is how that is phrased. Or they might say the data are not convincing. That might mean the data are not sufficient to validate the work, or the data quality and statistical significance are not good enough, or the writing style may have obscured the message that you're trying to convey. So this is all about making clear to the reader, and of course your reviewers are readers, why your work, why your conclusions are fully supported by the data. And if indeed there are not enough data to support the conclusions, you have to get more data. That's what this gentleman said in the interview as well. Sometimes it's just a matter of rephrasing it, or maybe we have to do more work. So let's now think about responding to reviewers' comments. As I said before, carefully read the comments and decide whether or not you need to do additional experiments, get additional data, do more work, in essence, whatever your field may be. And then consider the changes. It says here, make a list of the changes needed. That's fine, you can do it that way, and many people make a list of this needs to be done, and that, and that, and that. What I tend to do is I copy the referee's reports into a separate file, and I leave some space between each of the points that the referee makes. And I say, I write TBD, to be done, and in red, right? And then I start responding to each of the comments by the referee, and once I've included my response in the paper, I remove that TBD from the response to the referee and write there exactly what I've done to respond to the point. That way, I will not forget to respond to any of the issues raised by the referee, because that makes them angry. We don't want that. So respond to each comment separately. But be polite. Do it in a way to make sure that the referee understands that you have carefully considered their issue and that you have actually dealt with it appropriately. Now, most of the time when you get a rejection letter from the journal editor, it says, you know, these are the comments by the referees, please work on them and resubmit your paper, but please resubmit your paper by this and this deadline. And often that is like half a year, or in rapid publication journals, like the letters that I work for, we have a 4-week response deadline. It doesn't mean that that is a hard deadline, okay? You can easily, well, if you need more time, you can easily get more time. I think that applies to most journals. So normally what happens, people work on the revisions. Sometimes in our field they may have to do lots of additional computer simulations, and they take time, particularly on large computers. And so sometimes a 4-week turnaround for a letter is simply not long enough. And so I often get letters from such people saying, look, you know, we're trying very hard, but it takes more time than expected. Can I have an extension of the deadline? And I've been doing this for 11 years now, and I cannot remember a single instance in which I said no. I always give these extensions, provided that people give me good reasons. And needing more time because experiments or simulations take more time is a good reason. For our main journal, the turnaround time is 6 months. And we're we used to be quite lax and flexible about that, but these days we actually send people a reminder 2 weeks before the 6-month deadline, like, hey guys, what's happening with your paper? It's sitting in the queue. Your deadline is coming up in 2 weeks. Well, will we get a submission, a resubmission? And then most of the time the author says, oh, we're working on this, sorry, we'll do our best and we'll try to get it done, that's fine. Or maybe they need another month, and that's usually fine as well. I was talking to my editor-in-chief recently, And he had an interesting anecdote. And he was saying there was this one author who had been given a half-year turnaround time to revise his paper. And then he was sent a reminder and he asked for another half-year. Okay, it was granted. And then 2 weeks before the year deadline, he asked for another half-year because he was being bothered all the time by the editor-in-chief. So that was an interesting response. So I don't think this paper ever got published because the author simply did not get back with a revision. But my point here, apart from these perhaps slightly funny anecdotes, is that if you need more time, simply write a polite email to the editor explaining why you need more time and asking if you can have some more time. And that's fine, no problems. Very importantly as well, you don't have to agree with every single comment by the referees. It's not necessary. You are a scientist in your own right. You've done your own research, your analysis, your experiments perhaps, depending on your field. And so you have made the topic your own, right? The reviewer may have misunderstood something, or perhaps they come from a different school of thought and they disagree with you, but it's fine to disagree. Again, if you disagree, be polite, but you can say, well, we disagree for the following reasons and we believe that our reasoning is correct. That's perfectly okay, and the editor will take that into account. Right? You don't have to agree with every single thing that the referee says. But to ensure that you make all the changes suggested or respond that you disagree but in a polite way, be diplomatic and polite. And also importantly, when you resubmit your paper, make sure that the referees and editor have as little work on it as possible. So you do that by responding to every single point in turn, but also many journals want you to identify the changed text using a different font, for instance a bold font or a different color, like red, to show what has changed. That makes life for everyone involved easier, except perhaps for you because you have to change the font, but the reviewers will see what has been changed, the editor will see what has been changed, and it makes it easier for them to assess whether the changes are good enough to warrant publication at that point. So, let's talk a little bit about how to be polite in your response even if you disagree. Here are some examples. I've got 2 pages of examples. What you want to say, you just didn't understand what we wrote. But you don't say it that way, right? You say, some statements that we made were slightly ambiguous. We have clarified the text. Don't worry that the referee didn't understand it. You didn't write it clearly enough. Or what you want to say, that experiment would take forever and I don't have the time before my PhD deadline. So what you then say, well, the suggested experiment is very interesting. However, we feel that it is beyond the scope of our study. In other words, we can't be bothered to do it. Here we have 2 more. What you want to say, you didn't even read what we wrote. You don't say that, of course. You say, we did not intend to indicate this bit, and we have therefore altered the text to specify what we meant. So again, polite. And finally, this might not happen to you if you get your language checked by the service. You're being too picky about grammar and formatting. But what you then say, we apologize for the errors and have made the suggested changes. It's amazing how often reviewers actually comment on language, even minor picky details. Their job should be to comment on the science, not on the language, because most journals have language editors who deal with accepted papers after acceptance, right? Let's say the same thing twice, accepted papers after accepted. But so language editing is often done by journals themselves, in-house. So here are a few more facts about journal rejection. The rejection rate of a journal is the number of rejections divided by the total number of submissions to the journal. Almost 80% of journals have rejection rates between 25 and 60%. I mentioned earlier the letters journal I work for has an aim to have an acceptance rate of 40%, so that's a rejection of 60%. We're not quite there, we're about 50% now. Rejection rates in the humanities and social sciences are high, greater than 70%. In physical science journals, of order 30%. That's because physical science often relies on experiments, and once an experiment has been done correctly, it often is fairly easy to get published. there was a survey in the area of atmospheric sciences where the mean rejection rate was 33% for non-profit journals, so these are journals published by learned societies, for instance, and 48% for for-profit journals. For-profit journals are published by the likes of Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, and the commercial publishing houses. And finally, we saw this in one of the videos already this morning, about 75 articles are submitted every day for publication in high impact factor journals. There simply is not that much space in these journals available. So this automatically requires a high rejection rate. So what can you do once your paper has been rejected? Well, you can appeal the rejection. I've mentioned this several times. You can write a polite letter to the editor explaining why you disagree with the rejection and providing good scientific reasons why this decision may not be the correct one. And can the editor please reconsider and send it out for peer review anyway. The success rate, I would say, is 50-50. Sometimes, well, I do this as well. I desk reject papers, and I sometimes get appeals. Sometimes people get very angry if I reject their paper. There was an author recently. I had looked at his paper, which was interesting, but it wasn't quite as urgent or novel as the papers that we want to get in our journal. So I wrote that this submission is not appropriate for publication in the Astrophysical Journal Letters. And this guy did not do what I just said in these slides, okay? He responded immediately. He didn't think about it and sit on it for a while. He responded immediately, and he accused me of editorial misconduct by writing that sentence. Because I had written, this submission is not appropriate for publication in the Astrophysical Journal Letters, but he had read, this is not appropriate for publication. And so he said that I had committed editorial misconduct. So we had a good laugh in the editorial office because sometimes people get so upset and they don't read things clearly. He can resubmit to the same journal with changes made, of course, as we just discussed. He can also make the changes and submit to a different journal. Again, as I said, referees reports with free advice. Why not use that to your advantage? You can submit to a different journal without changes. Clearly not recommended, because the field is small and the chances are that the same referee, one of the same referees of the first journal will be assigned by the second journal. Right? They will not be very happy to see that you did not make any changes. Actually, I've had this several times as editor as well. There are, as I said, 5 or 6 main journals in my field, and I've had it occur to me that a paper that was submitted to our journal, that I got to handle, I sent it to a potential referee, and this person came back to me and said, it's 2 different ways. Either within an hour I got the referee's report. So that's quick. Yes, it's very quick, because I already wrote the same report for this other journal, and I recommended rejection there. So I had picked the same referee as another journal had done as well. Clearly this was an expert in the field. It has also happened that I got a paper to handle that I then sent out to a potential referee, and I then got a response saying, well, I've just assessed this particular submission for another journal, and I recommended rejection, so maybe you should not choose me this time. So the field, my point is, the field is small, and so it really is not a very good practice not to make any changes following referees' reports. And then finally, what you can do is you can just, put the manuscript away and never resubmit. But that's not good either, because some of the data that you may have collected may be useful to someone else in the field. Maybe to add that little tiny piece of the puzzle to complete the puzzle, or to validate someone else's work. So it's always useful to try and get your work published, because you're a member of a community and not just a single person out there.